This is the Miller Philosopher. Ever since the Lord of the Rings trilogy came to a close in 2003, and arguably even before that, many fans have been clamoring for a movie or movies set in the First Age and the Wars of Beleriand, the primeval events that laid the roots for everything we saw in the main trilogy. And in fact, the Silmarillion was written that way as well, intended to establish the history of Middle-earth, what it should have been, what it was like, and how and why it went into decline of mortality by the time we see and or read about it in the Third Age. Of course, all Tolkien fans know that the rights to the Silmarillion are owned by Tolkien House and jealously guarded, and properly so. Or at least they're supposed to be, since it seems that Rings of Power can use elements from it that were not in the Second Age agreement. Excuse my grumbling. But if that were worked out somehow, if the Silmarillion were somehow allowed to be made into a cinematic trilogy or even an anime trilogy for that matter, which I'm fine with, and it also would be cheaper to make, how would one even go about doing it? Given the great expenses of time that it covers and the many characters involved, it would be even a more monstrous task than what Amazon was trying to do with Rings of Power, by cramming the entire story of the Second Age into just a few decades at least. And they're still trying to work on that, mind you, so that should tell you how difficult that would be. How much more so would the Silmarillion be? How much more difficult? Now, I'm not a producer or a writer for movies, but if I had to put in a suggestion, it would be for a trilogy, broken up by the stories of Beren and Luthien, Turin and Nienel, and Elrond and Elros. Reason being that the book seems to mark these specific stories as leading to major turning points or coming right off major turning points in the Beleriand Wars and how Middle-earth was changed. Much like the trilogy handled the War of the Last Alliance versus Sauron and how that led up to the events of the Fellowship of the Ring. The first movie is going to have a prologue, basically explaining everything that happens up until the beginning of the movie. So this would include basically the creation of Middle-earth, the introduction of Melkor and how he became Morgoth, and Fëanor and his sons as well. That being said, the first movie's primary story is going to be that of Beren and Luthien, including their lives before the Dagor-Bragollach War, establishing their characters as separate beings. And this movie would also cover Hurin and his brother Huor as well. That story can be used to connect and communicate the larger events of Beleriand with the main story. You can also have, for the elven characters, Fingolfin, Fingon, Galadriel, Finrod, Thingol, and Melian. With a mention also too that Galadriel and Finrod's older brothers being killed at the beginning of the war. Perhaps they can be seen in one of the opening battle sequences of that war, and basically explaining also too how bad the war got almost immediately after Morgoth started it. And as well, the movie could also put some focus and explanation on the stories of Morgoth, Sauron, and Glaurung for the other side. Sauron in particular because of the role that he pretty much plays, and some attention to Glaurung given the role that he is going to play as the main antagonist for the second movie. This movie could also be used to introduce a sense of Fëanor as well, either in the prologue or being mentioned as the estranged bad boys branch of the Noldor, but with a particular mention of Maedhros as he is their leader. Honestly, we can also see them in battle as well during this movie, so explaining as to why the brothers Curufin and Celebrum get separated from them, and explaining how they made their way to Nargothrond. And this introduction can then be used later on in the other movies. So the movie would also basically cover the discovery of Gondolin by Hurin and Huor, which would become, again, a major power point for the other movies as well. That being said though, The movie ends with the crowning of Huron as the leader of the tribe of Dolomin, and of course the retirement of Beren and Luthien from the events of the world, basically. Now, the second movie would start out with the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, continuing and concluding Fingon's story, while also showing how Huron was captured and how his brother Huor was killed, but not before they had children. This movie would kind of be like Fellowship, but reversed, starting out as major battles amongst royalty, castles, and whatnot, but ending in a more personal fashion like the skirmish at Amon Hen in Fellowship, or, in this particular case, Turin's final battle with Glaurung, the dragon. This movie would be the Empire Strikes Back of the trilogy, being much more dark and much more grim. The movie would feature the stories of Turin and Tuor, and how their stories mirror each other being told side by side, and using that to explore how much Middle-earth has changed from the first movie. Now, having said that, some time jumps would probably be needed, but spaced out enough to get a feel for the characters at each stage of the journey, just so that it doesn't feel too jarring and we have time to basically bond with them. Having said all that, there would be emphasis on how Tuor arrives at Gondolin and the part that it plays. In particular, how Turgon explains to Tuor his relationship to his father and his uncle, and why Tuor ends up staying there as well, while Turin is pretty much left to struggle out in the world. The film would ultimately close with the fall of Gondolin, with the survivors making their way out of the valley to the western coast. And it would end with the rise of Doriath, thanks to Beren's and Luthien's son, Dior, using that as a brief speck of light in an already dark movie. The third movie is going to start out pretty dark, with the fall of Doriath, the killing of Dior, and using this to reintroduce the Sons of Fëanor back into the main story. It would also briefly cover the death of Huron. The movie would also cover how Elwing, the daughter of Dior, makes her way leading survivors from Doriath down to the encampment by the sea, and how she starts her relationship with Eärendil, the son of Tuor and Elwing from Gondolin. It would show the development of this relationship and how they eventually had children, Elrond and Elros, and would explain somewhat of how they grew up somewhat before, at some point, the Sons of Fëanor appear with the remnant army to commit the last kinslaying of the elves. This would also be used to explain the difference in personalities, to explain how the two boys make their latter choices later on. That being said, the movie can also be used to focus on Maedhros and Maglor, and how the oath of their father is affecting them, and how they have been very guilt-ridden, arguably being driven crazy by the curse that the oath has become on them, killing their own kind. Now, all this is going to lead up to the escape of Elwing and Eärendil to the west, because I'm not sure how they're going to show a full-grown woman changing to a bird. But, having said that, it will also feature the capture of Elrond and Elros, and how Maedhros and Maglor finally give in to their better nature and try to break the curse that is their oath by caring for their boys and teaching them instead of killing them as their oath commands them to. The raising of the kids and the journey of the couple west is going to be a good chunk of the film. Then would come the council with the Valar and the sending of the army out west to Middle-earth for the final showdown with Morgoth. And for this, you would definitely have to condense it, because the battle sequence would probably be a good 20 to 30 minutes long because of how massive it's supposed to be. Following this third act, it would close the last threads of the Sons of Fëanor and the Silmarils and their fates regarding that. It would also show the migration of many of the peoples of Middle-earth as we see the land starting to sink into the sea. Galadriel and Celeborn can meet Elros and Elrond for the first time, and we see the boys make their choices. and then we can close the movie with a glance over the sea over what was once Beleriand, with flashbacks of events from the previous movies, just to add context to the tragedy that was the first stage. But this is just me spitballing for the most part. If you like this or you have better ideas, let me know below. But this is Miller Philosopher. You guys have a good day.